Welcome to this course Development Economics 2. So we are today going to discuss the module 7, and this module, the title of this module is Gender Bias Part 1. So what we are going to learn in this lecture? Basic issues about gender bias, and as a related topic we are going to talk about the concept of gender equality and gender equity. Also, next, we are going to talk about the concept of missing woman mystery developed by Professor Amartya Sen. And then we are going to talk about the very important and recent phenomenon or recent development in the theory of gender and the population studies, that is the case of Sun meta preference. Sun meta preference. Let us first start with a quick recap about what we have done so far. So what we have done so far is the following. We have discussed in this unit, in this course on Development Economics 2. Now we are in the unit on demography and development. In this unit on demography and development, we have discussed so far basic definitional issues such as birth rate, death rate, total fertility rate, etc. Also, initially, we have discussed the interrelationships between development and demography. Why development and underdevelopment, all these issues are matter, and how demographic issues are related to these things. Then we have talked about the concepts regarding age structure. Globally, how age structure changed. We have studied this issue using the concept of global population pyramid, how globally age structure changed, and also we have supplemented our analysis of age structure using various country-wide studies. We have studied the case for Japan, we have studied the case for Niger, and also some of the Asian countries like India and China also we have considered while talking about age structure or evolution of age structure. All right. Next, after studying age structure in detail, we have discussed the concept of dependency ratio. So we have started with basic ideas about dependency, and then we have moved towards complex and advanced ideas of measurement of dependency ratio, and in this regard as well we have talked about various country experiences. For example, once again Japan is a special case due to its excessive number of elderly population, and then also we have cited the examples of India, China, and some of the African countries, and also many other countries in the world we have talked about. After discussing dependency ratio, we have discussed a significant model. We have touched upon the debate on population growth, how and why this debate is important, and whether or how fatalistic or how moderate is the threat of population growth. That debate we have touched upon, whether the high population growth in the world is a major issue, or can it be contained, or can it be addressed. So that was the debate. So after this debate, we have talked about the Malthusian model of Malthusian population trap. So that was a model that actually discussed the whole issue of population and population growth and income growth in a macro level, all over the economy and macro level. So after discussing that, now we are actually entering the area of gender. Now we are going to consider the issue of gender and related issues of fertility, etc. in the demography. Now, while considering the issue of gender, we are going to talk about basic issues about gender, gender bias, gender equity, gender equality. And in the upcoming lecture, in the next lecture, we are going to discuss the issue of fertility choice, the microeconomic theory of fertility choice. So in the Malthusian model, we have discussed the macro aspect of population growth, and next we are going to discuss the microeconomic theory of fertility choice. Moving on, So, first, before we begin the analysis part, let us offer a discussion on some of the terminologies in the glossary section. What are these terms? So, first term is gender equity. Gender equity is the process of being fair to women and men. To ensure fairness, measures must be taken to compensate for historical and social disadvantages that prevent women and men from operating on a level playing field. And what is this gender equality? The concept of gender equality entails that it is the state or condition that affords women and men equal enjoyment of human rights, socially valued goods, opportunities, and resources. So, gender equity and gender equality, there is a subtle difference. Gender equity is also about considering the historical and social disadvantages faced by women over long time period. Next important concept is baby boom. So that is about a dramatic increase in fertility rates and in the absolute number of births in the US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand during the period followed by World War II, during the period around 1947 to 1961. And baby bust is the period of rapid decline in US fertility rates to the record low levels during the period immediately after the baby boom. So let me once again reiterate the definition of gender equity. Gender equity is the process of being fair to women and men. To ensure fairness, measures must be taken to compensate for historical and social disadvantages that prevent women and men from operating on a level playing field. Moving on to understand the basic motivational issues about studying gender bias and gender equity or gender equality. Benefits of gender equality. What are the benefits? Why should we at all talk about gender equality? Do we really need it? What are the benefits of gender equality? Significant gains in economic growth if women acquire the following things. Number one, greater personal agency. Number two, assume political power. Number three, attain public status. Number four, participate equally in the labor force. Hence, the argument is that women labor force participation and female participation, women's overall participation in the economy has a major consequence for economic growth. So that way, this process is important. In developing countries, working women invest more in the schooling of their children. So some of the research studies have pointed out these following things, that in developing countries, working women are investing more in the schooling of their children. Also, from IMF research, from International Monetary Fund's research team's finding, we can observe that women's participation in the workforce to the level of men can boost the Indian economy by 27%. So, if we can create a situation in which women can equally participate in the economy just like men, that will eventually or that will actually boost the economic growth. That's the argument in the research. That's the argument coming out from the research. Moving on to the deeper dimensions of this issue. Now, gender equality or gender bias is an inherently multidimensional issue. There are three specific dimensions of gender. Number one, agency. Agency is regarding women's ability to make decisions on reproduction, spending on themselves, spending on their households, and their own mobility and health. Number two, second dimension. First dimension is agency. Second dimension is attitudes. Attitudes is about violence against women or wives and the ideal number of daughters preferred relative to the ideal number of sons. And the third dimension is about outcomes. It is about son preference, female employment, choice of contraception, education levels, age at marriage, age at first childbirth, and physical or sexual violence experienced by women. So these are the three very important dimensions regarding this issue: agency, attitudes, and outcomes. Now, the question is that the first question in this lecture we are taking, that how do India perform in these aspects or regarding these dimensions? Let us try to give an answer to this question using this table. So this table is actually summarizing the India's performance regarding all these three dimensions, and there are some specific issues have been also considered in this table. Specific issues are like involved in decisions about their own health, whether women are taking decisions about their household purchases, etc. What are the findings from this table? Explanation. So on 12 out of 17 variables, India have improved over time. For example, women in India involved in decisions about their own health, this has increased to 74.5% during 2015-16. The percentage, another example, the percentage of women who did not experience physical or emotional violence increased from 63% to 71%. And the median age at first childbirth increased by 1.3 years over the 10 years, which is since 2005 to 2015. On 7 out of these 12 cases, India performs better than or at par with the cohort of other developing countries. So that is also about India's performance in comparison to other developing countries. Now, so that's about performance, and now the problems. What are the remaining problems? Still we have several problems in India and in other developing countries. The problems are sex ratio is still biased against women, and the problem of son meta preference. Son preference giving rise to sex-selective abortion and differential survival has led to skewed sex ratios at birth and beyond, leading to estimates of 63 million missing women. I am going to discuss the issue of missing women shortly. Son meta preference, which involves parents adopting fertility stopping rules, having children, which means stopping rules means having children until the desired number of sons are born. This meta preference leads naturally to the notional category of unwanted girls, which is estimated at over 21 million. It implies that society still appears to want fewer women to be born. So that's a serious problem. So now, to understand this problem in a deeper way, let us consider Professor Amartya Sen's theorization regarding this. His a very important point, that is about missing woman mystery. Social inequality outweighs women's survival advantage in Asia and North Africa. In Europe and North America, women tend to outnumber men. In many developing countries, especially in Asia and North Africa, the female-male ratio may be very low. These differences are relevant to an assessment of female inequality across the world. So, Please remember, while talking about the missing woman mystery of Professor Amartya Sen, we are taking the sex ratio as female is to male ratio. Now, what should be the usual scenario? Everywhere, about 5% more boys than girls are born, but women are hardier than men and given similar care, survive better at all ages, including in utero. There are other causes for this preponderance of women. Remaining impact of the deaths of men in the last World War, which is the World War II. Next, more cigarette smoking and violent deaths among men. But even taking these into account, women would still outnumber men if given similar care. So what is Sen's argument? What is Professor Sen's main argument? Social factors must therefore explain the low female-male ratios in Asian and North African countries. These countries would have millions more women if they showed the female-male ratios of Europe and the US. So the key argument here is the following, that Professor Amartya Sen is arguing that if women received similar care as men, then there could have been and there should be more women in developing countries, in countries of Asia and Africa. Using population models based on Western demographic experience, it is possible to estimate roughly how many women there would be without any female disadvantage in survival. Given the actual life expectancy and the fertility rates in these countries, Professor Sen has estimated and reported there are 29 million missing women in China and there were 23 million missing women in India and an overall total of 60 million missing women for selected countries. These numbers are still enormous. But remember, these reported numbers are at the time period of early 1990s, right? So the next question is that why is overall mortality for females higher than that for males in these countries? So to answer this question, let us consider for India, where age-specific mortality for females consistently exceeds that for males until the 4th decade. This excess mortality at childbearing age may be partly due to maternal mortality, but no such explanation is possible for female disadvantage in survival in infancy and childhood. Despite occasional distressing accounts of female infanticide, this could not explain the extra mortality or its age distribution. So the point is that what is the prime suspect? So there must be social issues responsible for missing women. Prime suspect is that the comparative neglect of female health and nutrition, especially but not exclusively during childhood. Considerable direct evidence exists of neglect of female children in terms of health care, admission to hospitals, and even in terms of feeding. Similar evidence of relative neglect of the health and nutrition of female children may be found in India and many other countries in Asia and North Africa. What about China? In case of China, some evidence suggests that the extent of neglect may have increased, particularly since compulsory restrictions on the size of families were introduced in some parts of the countries in the late 1970s. So explanation is that possibly it is indicating hiding of newborn female children to avoid the rigorous and compulsory restrictions on the size of the family. Now, what causes the relative neglect of females and how it can be changed? So the causes are largely possible influences include traditional cultures and values. So traditional cultures and values are largely important for such a scenario. And what are the possible solutions? Number one, work related. The ability to earn an outside income through paid employment seems to enhance the social standing of a woman. And this makes her contribution to the prosperity of the family more visible. Also, being less dependent on others, she has more voice. So this is talking, so number one, so what are the possible solutions? Number one, female workforce participation or employment for women. Number two, education. Especially female literacy may make a substantial difference. Number three, rights, women's economic rights. Rights such as land ownership rights, rights of inheritance may be very important. And public policy can influence all of these. So to discuss the success of public policy, let us consider the case of Kerala. Kerala provides an illuminating exception to the prevailing experience of missing women. Adult literacy rate is very high in Kerala. Property inheritance to women were practiced. Many women participate in the labor force. So as a result, in Kerala, we can observe the female-male ratio is very good compared to other states in India, and it is at par with to the developed countries. So it seems that the missing woman may be rescuable after all by public policy. So Professor Sen's argument is that the problem of missing women can be addressed through public policy. So after discussing the issue of missing women, let us now discuss the last topic of this lecture, that is son meta-preference. Son meta-preference is a technical term, and it actually means excessive bias towards son. While active sex selection via fetal abortion is widely prevalent, son preference can also manifest itself in a subtler form. Parents may choose to keep having children until they get the desired number of sons. This is called son meta-preference. A son meta-preference means even though it does not lead to sex-selective abortion, it may nevertheless be detrimental to female children because it may lead to fewer resources devoted to them. How to measure son meta-preference? So one measurement issue is that sex ratio of the last child, SRLC, gives us a good measurement for son meta-preference. And remember, now as we are discussing this issue of son meta-preference, here as it is pointed out that now we are taking sex ratio as male is to female, right? While discussing the missing woman mystery in according to Professor Sen's argument, we were taking sex ratio as female is to male, and now we are taking sex ratio while discussing the son meta-preference as male is to female. So how do Indian states perform in this regard regarding son meta-preference? So this figure is about India's states, various states' performances about son meta-preference. This figure plots the SRLC against the SRB for Indian states. The dashed vertical and horizontal lines represent the ideal benchmark with no son preference. Now Meghalaya stands out as an ideal state because both sex ratio at birth and sex ratio of last child are close to the benchmark. Now states like Kerala do not seem to practice sex-selective abortions but indicate some son meta-preference. And remember, most importantly, Punjab and Haryana, on the other hand, these states exhibit extremely high son preference and meta-preference. The overall sex ratios are significantly above the biological benchmark. So what are the recent findings? Recent findings are Families where a son is born are more likely to stop having children than families where a girl is born. This is suggestive of parents employing stopping rules, having children till a son is born and stopping thereafter. The only exception to this pattern is with regards to the first child. Even parents who have a first-born son are likely to continue having children, which reflects a pure family size preference. Indian parents on average want to have at least 2 children. Now, here are Jayachandran in his latest study lists a number of reasons for such a son preference. Number one, including patrilocality, that means women having to move to husbands' houses after marriage. Number two, patrilineality, property passing on to sons rather than daughters. Dowry, number three is dowry, which leads to extra costs of having girls. Number four, old age support from sons and rituals performed by sons. Now we know that Punjab and Haryana, these states have performed really badly in terms of son meta preference, and such son meta preference gives rise to unwanted girls child. Girls, that means unwanted girls means girls whose parents wanted a boy but instead had a girl. And there is an estimation of this number of unwanted girls. That estimation is saying it is around 21 million. So what are the take-home points from this lecture? So the point is about gender equality, which is related to the issue of gender bias. And next, the deeper issue is about to understand the deeper issue behind gender bias and gender equality, the concept of missing woman mystery developed by Professor Amartya Sen. And next, another important concept is about son meta preference. Thank you.